All right, who were the first guitar players to really make you sit up and take notice?
Who were the first guitar players?
Yeah, the ones that really...
I noticed, well, obviously, with my age, seeing the Beatles and the Rolling Stones was pretty important. But they weren't really melodic lead guitarists as much. Then around, I guess, 67, there were a bunch of guys, Jimi Hendrix and Jeff Beck. And, and everybody referred back to the blues, so I followed them back to the, like Buddy Guy and, Otis, Rush and the Kings, B.B. King, Freddie King, Albert King.
Yeah.
Did a lot of scurrying around, to find, the roots of this electric guitar business, which was exciting to me because I remember when I saw the Stones and the Beatles, on TV. And I thought, well, there's sort of like 4 or 5 young men singing songs, and I couldn't figure out how they could be making such an impact, And I thought there had to be some sort of a hocus pocus or a trick. And then later on, I thought it was the electricity in the electric guitar that was making, supporting them, and it was kind of like the magic wand,
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to do. And it's probably every other kid on the block too, Yeah,
it's a familiar story.
Yeah, it's a pyramid game.
Yeah. Can you just give us a brief rundown on your musical background before television?
Oh, well, it's not much. I played a little bit of piano when I was really little, but just nobody in my family knew how to play or could afford lessons, so I just banged around. And then I played ukulele, if you could believe it, but as a guitar. It was like my stepfather had one, and I would sneak it and play it with a quarter. And he got very upset because you were supposed to play it with a big felt pick, but I couldn't stand the big felt pick, so I would play it with a nickel or a coin.
Yeah.
And my cousins put a band together. They showed me a couple of chords on guitar, and I was kind of off and running. But then I also played drums for a couple of years, and even took drum lessons and stuff.
So by the time you joined television, were you specifically looking for a band to hook up with at that stage?
That was exactly the moment at which I wanted to find a band either of my own or to be in. So it was very kind of lucky, if you want to call it that, for television to fall together that way.
Being in the right place at the right time.
I suppose so, yeah. Or the right place at the right time was, found me.
Yeah. Was television the initial choice of name for the band?
We all sat around and said, look, we got to come up with a name, and everybody should go and write a big list, and I wrote out a few names, and Billy wrote out a few names, and Tom wrote out a few names, and Richard Hell wrote out a few names, and television was on Richard's list, and it was he had outlined it with little stars, with the typewriter.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of stuck. We were looking for something, like what was it? Sony, The Sony came up with this name that crossed language barriers and didn't really mean anything, but it was about sound,
Yeah.
And television was an interesting object that was like everywhere and meant nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. What about the early rehearsals for the band? Do you remember there's any signs being there right from the start as to the musical direction you guys were going to take?
To me, it was like joining the circus, It was very exciting, and if I say idiotic, I mean that in the original Greek. I mean, having one's, idiot, to be oneself, to be, like the complete fool, to go the antithesis of the direction that you're thought to be supposed to be going in. It was, and it was there was a real bond amongst us. I mean, we used to writhe on the floor like little worms. I mean, I'm serious. There's actually, I don't know if there's any film of that, but you know, we used to knock the mic stands down and then follow them down. Not on purpose, but just in the glee. You know, like the Glee Club.
Yeah.
We were full of glee and elation.
You remember the first gig as television?
Oh, sure, I remember it. Mostly I remember it because I had stripped my hair down to like a neutral because I wanted to dye it blue, but I didn't want to put permanent hair dye in. This was like now 73, you know, walking around with blue hair could get you even in trouble, even in New York. So I used food coloring. And of course, I didn't realize it, but when I started under the hot lights on the stage and the sweating, the food coloring ran right out of my hair and all over me in a big puddle. But the show was very it was very interesting. Let's put it that way. You know, we were a gigantic, lovely train wreck, which we all, you know, both enjoyed and you know, were shocked by. I mean, it's one thing to be in the privacy of your rehearsal space, you know, doing your little thing, and then it's quite another thing to be thrown on a screen in front of people. But it was a little theater in the Midtown Manhattan. We rented it out and actually filled it up.
Wow. Which
was pretty exciting. But we had our manager Terry Ork was very gung ho about being a patron of the arts. So he did a lot of the getting people out of the woodwork kind of thing.
What's about CBGBs in those days? Did the place have a real special feel, have a special atmosphere to it?
Well, it's a real long, dark, you know, mostly wooden, older kind of bar with, you know, hanging neon signs. He's got like the really big collection of hanging neon beer signs, you know. And it was all very makeshift. The guy, Hilly, was, you know, just built a stage himself, like out of 2x4s, and you know, it's one of those places that you go and you set up the equipment and you have this pure natural resonance in the sound. I mean, there's not a lot of it was a completely unpretentious place, you know.
Yeah.
And it was, in a way, it was the place we were looking for was to be like out of the way, where nobody would try to steal our gig from us, and we wouldn't be caught with the pooftas coming in with their, you know, shishi fashion.
What about some of the other bands and artists that you would have come across playing there during those days? Who were the standouts for you?
Well, any band that didn't have a record contract that did original music was kind of was out of luck. You know, I mean, if you didn't play covers, you couldn't get a gig in a bar, in a regular bar, and if you didn't have a record contract, you couldn't get a gig at the 2 or 3, you know, showcase places in town. So there was really no place to go. The nice thing about CBGBs was that they would let almost anybody at least have 1 or 2 gigs, you know, and if you brought in people, then you know, you were on your way, and it was you could get in a kind of rotation. I mean, clearly the bands that did that I remember are the ones that did rather well for themselves, Talking Heads and Ramones and Blondie and like those, you know.
What do you recall of the Maki Moon sessions? Do you remember feeling that you'd come up with something pretty special after finishing that record?
Well, we'd been playing for a couple of years, so we knew what we were doing at the time. I mean, we went in, and it was really to get a document of this, you know, the musical urge that was in the music. And so, I mean, I think we did a pretty good job of, you know, of capturing that. So, I mean, I was pretty proud of the record myself, and, you know, it certainly seems to have stood up the test of time in the same way that certain a couple, other records have that are of a band with the same kind of initial force going on. I think like the Doors record is the first record is like that. It's a document. It's not a craft, exceptionally studio crafted it, or even the Paul Butterfield Blues Band first record. A document of a band which contains the elements of its excitement that it has live, rather than a studio designed record with sounds that you couldn't replicate on stage, etc. So it was also good for us because it was in actual fact very close to what we were like, except cleaner, and you were able to hear it all.
Yeah, a lot of acclaim for that record. Did it put a lot of pressure on you in when coming back for the second record to because you had something there to live up to?
No. I mean, you say we got a lot of acclaim, and we did to some degree in certain areas in England and certain small parts of the U.S., but mostly we were still completely, and I think we still are, completely unknown in a large portion of America, which is just, the humongous place. So, I mean, I don't think there was any creative pressure in that regard.
Okay. Would you have happily traded some of that critical acclaim for a few more record sales?
Say that again?
Would you have happily traded some of that critical acclaim for greater commercial success?
No, I mean, I don't know. You can't go back anyway, so what's the difference?
What's the point?
I mean, it's kind of like you're in a toboggan and you're going downhill, and that's that,
Yeah.
Life is like that. You can't, it's idiotic to think. That's like sitting on a bar stool, fantasizing. It's not going to do anything, and it's a waste of psychic energy.
On the whole, looking back, how would you summarize, or how would you say working relationships were within the band?
Oh, there's so much been written about that. I mean, there's not really much to say. In the very beginning, it was very exciting to be involved in something where where all four of us were as dedicated as we were, and that's about all that needs to be said, really.
Was there any standout contributing factor to causing the split of the band?
Oh, I'm sure there were a bunch of contributing factors, most of which have been poured over with a microscope, but I mean, I'm sure that just on my end, I'm sure that I contributed to it with my rock and roll lifestyle, which I think was in fact maybe dangerous, and I could have easily been killed by it. And I mean, it's sort of like how do you put up with that? That's one element. I mean, I'm just that maybe I don't want to put it all on me. It has nothing to do, it's not all on me. It's just the whole confluence of things. But you're asking, and so I mean, clearly I'm not blameless.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody was. There were other elements going on too.
You reunited for an album in 1992. What brought that one about?
Well, let's see. Tom had a manager and I had a manager at the time. I don't know how the heck it got that they got talking or we got talking, but there was just an idea of would it be interesting, to get together and see if it would be interesting. And after some time, and I actually ended up not being with that business manager after a while, but the ball kept rolling, and we finally got all four of us together, and we played again. and decided that it would be an interesting thing to do because we had never ruled it out. We always kind of thought of ourselves in the same manner as like a jazz quartet, you know. I mean, you make some records, you go and you do other things, and then nobody thinks it's unusual if you get back together, that same group of musicians, and do something else.
Have you had any problems over the years having your work maybe not accepted so much on its own merits, but being compared to your past work with television?
Well, Tom's the principal songwriter in television, so anything that I do is going to be completely different. And so, obviously, since television is the main course of interest for my work as well, then, you know, people are going to judge them against one another, and they're really not. They're really kind of two separate animals. So, I mean, in that way, but I mean, I benefit from that as well. So it's just one of those things.
Done a bit of production work over the years too. Is that a role you're comfortable with right from the start?
I would like to do more of that. It's just that I don't always have time or people calling for some reason. So I don't, But yeah, I mean, that's something I'm going to hope to do more of in the future as well. I thoroughly enjoy it.
Have you been able to use your experience as a recording artist working with other producers to help you decide the type of producer that you want to be?
You're going to have to rephrase that. I got the beeps in the middle.
Oh, sorry.
It threw me.
Dealing with other producers in the past, as you have as a recording artist, working with other producers, have you been able to take that experience with you to help you decide the type of producer you want to be?
Well, sure. I mean, in this way, I mean, I've worked with some really fantastic engineers and producers over the years, which have allowed me to, I wish I had more savvy, and I wish I had more, I wish I'd been more on the ball, like, soaking up their methods of working and the little tricks. I mean, I have a bunch of little tricks that I either that I would like to use that I haven't had the opportunity to use, etc. But of course, you can't help but get influenced by people, quality people that you work with.
One ongoing working relationship you've had in recent years has been with Matthew Sweet. How did that one come together?
Oh, that's a funny story because there was a band called the Golden Palominos.
Yeah.
Do you remember them?
Yep, sure.
Anton Fier's band, and he called me up one day and he said, "Listen, my guitar player and one of my singers quit. I need a guitar player. Can you learn 15 songs in like 2 days?" And I said, "Anton, I can't learn. I don't learn that fast. But I'll tell you what, I can pretend and I can fool everybody. You'll think I knew them." But he said, "Well, let's have a rehearsal." So I went to the rehearsal, and Matthew Sweet was playing bass, and Matthew and I struck up a friendship, and then and musically appreciated each other. So when he was making his next record, he called me in, and I started playing with him. And as a matter of fact, that's the only time I've gotten to go to Australia was with Matthew. That's right. One time, and boy, what an experience! That was great. We'd love to get back there somehow.
Would you say that outside of television, that working relationship with Matthew would be one of the most satisfying?
Whoa, absolutely. Yeah. The nice thing about Matt, I mean, with television, there's this guitar interweave, there's the back and forth, and you really can't tell who's playing what often. I mean, even live, I listened to some tapes of some of our shows from '92 in order to prepare for the more recent shows that we've been doing, and frankly, I sometimes couldn't tell who was doing what. I was like, was that me or was that Tom? And was that Tom or was that me? And people are always coming up to me and saying, "Oh, I love your work on such and such," and I go, "Well, no, that was Tom." And then I'll hear somebody else go, "Tom played this so good," and I'm like, "Well, that was me." But but with Matthew, it was very clear he played rhythm, I played lead, so it was kind of just to be a gunslinger,
Sure.
So that was a lot of fun. Plus, Matthew had the appeal at the time to enormous quantities of young people, especially young girls. So it was kind of like being on tour with I don't mean this in a negative way, but like with something like David Cassidy or something. I mean, serious adoration from the younger female set, which was quite hilarious. I used to say I could have set myself on fire and nobody would have noticed. but yeah, it was a ton of fun.
The last solo record was, I guess, pretty much a homemade affair. Was there great?
Well, not homemade, but yeah, my own studio. pretty crafty. Was not in my home. It was erroneously reported.
Oh, okay.
I didn't make it at home.
But it was your own studio.
Yeah, my own little jerry-rigged studio. Okay. So yeah, it was homemade.
Did that provide a real sense of freedom there to be able to sit down and record without watching the clock and telling up the cost of studio time?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I mean, not only that, but I spent maybe close to a year just sort of drooling over it, you know. I would go in and I would leave it for weeks at a time, and, you know, it didn't matter. I have another record working like that, but I'm trying to get it to sound a little better, so I used an outside studio for basic tracks, and it's turning into an expensive proposition, and, you know, since I'm funding myself, it's put me in the hole again, so that's the way it is.
I believe you've been doing a bit of guitar teaching in recent times. How have you found that experience?
Oh, that's good for me because mostly what I do is unconscious. It's sort of like riding a bicycle, you know. How do you teach somebody to, you know, do something like that? You have to make what's normally an unconscious activity conscious, and so it's great for me because I have to do fair bit of studying myself, and I have to do a lot of practicing to keep on the ball with it. So it's been good for me. It's kind of just like having a policeman around, you know, who says you will play guitar, or, you know, your students will notice that you're slacking off. So.
Are you teaching at all levels, like beginners, advanced, and?
It depends, you know. I mean, I would say I teach all levels. I don't have all that. I really don't have very many students at all. It's not a business in that regard, you know. It's just people kept bugging me to do it, and then I finally realized there would be a good thing for me, sort of like in the guilds in the Middle Ages, you know, where all the painters had students and all the musicians had students.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like Bach had students. Nowadays, you get people don't take students. You know, they're all like it's all egocentric, and, you know, I'm not going to show you how to get better because I'm in competition with you. And frankly, you know, I mean, there isn't really competition because talent will out, and, you know, all the study in the world won't help you if you don't have some intrinsic sort of itness. You know, the famous it, the elusive it, whatever
it is.
Whatever it is. You see, you don't know unless you have it, and then you can't describe it.
Yeah. Are you finding, though, that teaching has helped you learn and rediscover things about the guitar yourself?
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Absolutely. The foremost reason for teaching is because it forces you to re-examine the instrument again and again and again and again, and especially if you get someone, you know, who does not understand something, then, or has a question that you have trouble answering, and then you have to go find out, you know, in order to be able to answer that question.
Now, I believe television reunited briefly again last year for some gigs. Can you tell us about those?
Well, we got a gig in March.
Oh, have you?
Los Angeles.
Right.
At the All Tomorrow's Parties Festival in UCLA on March 15th. And there might be something else, but it's not firm, so who the hell knows? That's the kind of thing it is, you know.
Right.
We didn't do a whole heck of... I mean, we did tour, but we didn't do a whole lot of touring even back then, not compared to, some other bands, get in a van and just ride off into the sunset, no matter what, losing money and developing an audience. Television really never did that, so we're not about to really do that now either, but occasionally, for the right, when the gig is right, we're going to be able to play.
Right, so you haven't shut the door on the band completely?
No, how can we shut the door on the band? We've got gigs coming up.
Yeah. How do you think history has treated television? Do you think it receives enough recognition for its influence on that whole punk new wave scene?
Oh, man. I don't... Sure. How's that?
What would you say is the band's main achievement? What would you like to see it most remembered for?
That's not for me really not for me to say.
Fair enough. And just as we wind up, Richard, the album you've got in the works at the moment, what's the projected release date for that, or have you got any rough idea when you're looking at getting that one out?
No, hopefully, within the decade, sooner than later. But I get sidetracked easily, so yeah. Who knows?
So it'll remain a work in progress.
Yeah, it's a work in progress, and I'm looking into some things.
No worries.
For it.
Okay, Richard, look, thanks for your time. I'll let you get back to your breakfast there.
All right.
Thanks for catching up with me this early hour of the morning for you.
You bet.
And
thanks for calling, John.
No worries. We hope to see you down in Australia again one day. It'll be great.
I hope to.
All the best.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.